The Ozarks are marketed as peaceful, lakes sparkling under the summer sun, cabins tucked into forested hillsides, bass boats gliding across quiet water at dawn. The promise of escape from complicated urban life into something simpler, slower, more connected to nature. Every tourism brochure sells the same vision: the Ozarks as retreat, as relaxation, as the antidote to modern stress. But the Ozarks aren't simple. They never were. This region shaped Missouri's identity, its politics, its economy, its culture, its relationship with the rest of America, more than Kansas City or St. Louis ever did. The Ozarks aren't just where Missourians go to vacation. They're where Missouri's character was forged. And most of what built that character, most of what made the Ozarks what they actually are, beneath the tourism marketing, the lakefront developments, and the entertainment complexes, never makes the brochure. Tonight, we're breaking down 25 Ozarks truths that Missouri doesn't talk about: the history, the economics, the politics, and the hidden dynamics that explain why this region matters far more than casual observers understand. 25. The Ozarks were never meant to be rich. The soil here is thin, rocky, difficult to farm at scale. The terrain resists the kind of agricultural development that built wealth elsewhere in Missouri and across the American South. The Ozarks were not built for plantation wealth like the Mississippi Delta or the Missouri River bottomlands. There was no cotton economy here, no vast slave-holding estates, no agricultural aristocracy accumulating generational fortunes. The Ozarks were built for survival, for people who could scratch a living from difficult land and who did not expect more than that. That's why the culture here values independence over expansion, self-reliance over growth, getting by over getting ahead. These are not character flaws. They are adaptations to geography that made other approaches impossible. The region was divided during the Civil War. The Ozarks weren't clearly Union or Confederate the way other regions were. There was no dominant political consensus, no unified regional identity that aligned with either side. The region was divided. The Ozarks were fractured, neighbor against neighbor, families divided, communities torn apart by loyalties that cut across the simple geographic lines that defined the war elsewhere. The fighting here was guerrilla, personal, and brutal. Long before official battles even reached the region, raiders and bushwhackers made the Ozarks dangerous for everyone regardless of political allegiance. That history of division never fully healed. Its echoes persist in regional culture, in the suspicion of outside authority, in the fierce localism that still defines Ozarks communities. Number 23. The Ozarks have some of the largest cave systems in North America. Beneath the hills and hollows lies an underground world that most visitors never see. Thousands of mapped caves wind through the limestone karst that underlies the region, and thousands more remain unmapped, unexplored systems that might extend for miles beneath the surface. The ground here is hollow in places, literally. That geological reality affects everything from water quality to construction to the strange sinkholes that occasionally swallow backyards. The Ozarks aren't just what you see above ground, they're what exists beneath it, vast, dark, and largely unknown. Lake of the Ozarks was engineered for power, not tourism. It was not built for boats and vacation homes. It was not designed as a recreational destination or a tourism asset. It was built in the 1930s to generate hydroelectric power during the Great Depression. The Bagnell Dam created the lake as an industrial project, bringing electricity to a region that lacked it, while providing jobs during economic catastrophe. The party culture came later. The vacation homes came later. Entertainment complexes, restaurant strips, and boat rental companies all emerged from something that was originally about power generation and economic survival. The lake's serpentine shape, Over 1,100 miles of shoreline was not designed for aesthetics. It is what happened when you flooded Ozark valleys. Number 21. The redneck stereotype was manufactured. In the early 20th century, journalists discovered that portraying the Ozarks as backward and isolated sold newspapers. The hillbilly narrative generated readership among urban audiences who enjoyed feeling superior to rural populations they would never meet. The stereotype stuck. It became the lens through which America viewed the entire region. Moonshine and feuds and barefoot children and all the other imagery that reduced complex communities to cartoonish simplicity. But much of it was urban exaggeration. Deliberate caricature was used to reinforce class divides and to entertain readers who wanted confirmation that their urban lives represented progress, while rural lives represented backwardness. The Ozarks were never as isolated, as backward, or as simple as the stereotype suggested. But stereotypes do not require accuracy to persist. The Ozarks are one of America's most biodiverse regions. Over 200 fish species inhabit Ozark waters, with more freshwater fish diversity than most people realize exists anywhere in North America. Rare salamanders survive in cave systems found nowhere else. Endangered bat species depend on Ozark caves for hibernation. Unique ecosystems developed here over millions of years, adapted to specific conditions that exist only in this region. The Ozarks aren't just beautiful, they are biologically irreplaceable. The species that exist here, many found nowhere else on Earth, represent evolutionary heritage that took millions of years to develop and could disappear within decades if conditions change. 19. Walmart changed the power structure. Walmart is headquartered in Bentonville, Arkansas, just across the state line from the Missouri Ozarks. That proximity made the entire region feel Walmart's influence in ways that reshaped economic reality. When Walmart expanded, small-town retailers faced competition they could not survive. The local hardware stores, the family groceries, the downtown merchants who had served communities for generations, they either adapted to a Walmart-dominated landscape or they disappeared. The retail gravity of the Ozarks shifted permanently. Shopping patterns reorganized around Walmart locations. Employment concentrated in the company's ecosystem. Economic power that once distributed across many small businesses consolidated into a single corporate structure. 18. The meth epidemic origins are tied to rural isolation. The Ozarks became ground zero in the 1990s methamphetamine crisis. Not because people here were worse than people elsewhere, and not because of some moral failing specific to the region. It happened because isolation, economic stagnation, and lack of oversight created conditions where manufacturing and distribution could spread quickly. Rural communities had limited law enforcement presence. Economic desperation made illegal income attractive. Geographic isolation made surveillance difficult. All the preconditions for an epidemic existed here before the first lab was built. The meth crisis devastated communities that were already struggling. It compounded problems rather than creating them. And its legacy, in damaged families, in struggling children, in communities still recovering decades later, remains present. 17. The Mark Twain National Forest was not always protected. The forests that look ancient today, the second-growth timber that covers hillsides throughout the Ozarks, often are not ancient at all. Large-scale logging stripped parts of the Ozarks in the early 1900s. Timber companies clear-cut entire mountains. The forest that existed before European settlement was largely destroyed for lumber and railroad ties. What exists today is regrowth. The Mark Twain National Forest protects land that was devastated within living memory of some current residents. The wilderness that tourists experience is restoration, not preservation. 16. The Ozarks don't vote the way outsiders think. National observers often assume they understand rural voting patterns. The Ozarks complicate those assumptions. This region helped shape Missouri's political pivot from swing state to reliably Republican. Rural turnout patterns here have influenced statewide outcomes for decades, often in ways that surprised analysts who focused only on Kansas City and St. Louis. The Ozarks aren't politically monolithic, but they're politically powerful in ways that their population alone wouldn't suggest. The intensity of engagement, the consistency of turnout, the cultural factors that shape political identity here, all of it matters more than casual observers recognize. 15. The lake boom is pricing out locals. Lakefront property values have surged as outside money discovered the Ozarks. Vacation homes purchased by families from Kansas City, St. Louis, and beyond outbid generational families who have lived on the same land for decades. The people whose families actually built the communities around Ozark lakes increasingly cannot afford to stay. Quiet displacement is happening without protest, without media coverage, without the organized resistance that might slow it. The economic forces are impersonal. The families being displaced cannot compete with the resources being deployed against them. The lakes are becoming playgrounds for people who visit, rather than homes for people who stay. 14. There are entire towns that never recovered. Rail towns that existed because trains stopped there, and then died when the trains stopped stopping. Mining towns that boomed when minerals were extracted, and then collapsed when the deposits were exhausted. Mill towns that processed timber, and then faded when the forests were clear-cut. When industries left, some Ozark places never rebuilt. They are still there, quieter now, populated by people who stayed because leaving was not an option. The buildings remain. The history remains. The people remain. But the economic purpose that justified the town's existence is gone and is not returning. 13. The Ozarks sit on major mineral deposits. Lead, zinc, and other minerals shaped early Ozark industry. The lead belt that extends into the Ozarks produced enormous quantities of metal that built American infrastructure. Mining scars still exist. Tailings piles, contaminated waterways. Environmental damage will persist for generations regardless of remediation efforts. The wealth that mining extracted left the region. The damage that mining created stayed. 12. Springfield became the quiet capital of the Ozarks. Springfield doesn't market itself as the Ozarks capital. It doesn't claim regional dominance or seek recognition for the role it plays. But healthcare systems headquartered in Springfield serve populations across the Ozarks and beyond. Educational institutions in Springfield train workers who staff businesses throughout the region. Logistics networks centered on Springfield move goods that the regional economy depends on. Springfield. Anchors. The Ozarks more than people admit. It's not flashy, but it's strategic. The city's stability provides a foundation that more volatile communities can't match. The poverty rate has always been misunderstood. The Ozarks aren't uniformly poor. Regional statistics that show elevated poverty rates mask enormous variation within the region. Some communities struggle with persistent poverty that has lasted for generations. Others thrive with economic activity that exceeds state averages. Lake houses worth millions sit minutes away from communities where most families qualify for assistance. The inequality is geographic, concentrated in specific places rather than distributed evenly, which makes regional generalizations misleading. 10. The Back to the Land movement revived the region in the 1970s. Urban escapees moved to the Ozarks in the 1970s seeking self-sufficiency. They bought cheap land, built homesteads, and attempted to create alternatives to the mainstream economy they had rejected. Some stayed and integrated into communities that had existed for generations. Some left when the reality of rural life proved harder than the fantasy suggested. But they reshaped culture and agriculture in lasting ways. Organic farming, artisanal production, and alternative education became more common. Many practices that seem mainstream now often trace to communities these migrants established. Number 9. The Ozarks were never truly isolated. The isolation narrative misses the history of connection that preceded highways. Rivers connected the Ozarks to national and international trade networks for centuries. Before railroads, before automobiles, waterways moved goods and people through the region constantly. Trade networks ran deeper than stereotypes suggest. The Ozarks were integrated into larger economies long before modern infrastructure made that integration obvious. 8. Tourism is now the economic lifeline. Branson alone pulls millions of visitors annually. The entertainment industry that grew there, including theaters, attractions, and accommodations, employs thousands and generates economic activity that replaced industries that no longer exist. Entertainment replaced extraction. Tourism replaced timber, mining, and agriculture as the dominant economic driver. That shift changed the regional economy permanently, creating service sector employment while eliminating the industrial jobs that once sustained middle-class families. 7. Climate patterns are shifting faster here. Flooding cycles are intensifying. Storm severity is increasing. The extreme weather events that once occurred rarely now occur regularly. The terrain amplifies runoff. When heavy rain falls on Ozark hillsides, water concentrates in valleys with dangerous speed. The same topography that creates scenic beauty creates flood risk that is growing as weather patterns change. This affects development more than officials publicly admit. The infrastructure built for historical climate patterns may not survive the patterns emerging now. 6. Property taxes remain lower than most growth states. Low property taxes are part of the Ozarks' appeal. Retirees, investors, and families seeking affordability find tax burdens here manageable compared to states they are fleeing. But low taxes also limit infrastructure upgrades. The roads, water systems, emergency services, and schools that communities need require funding that low tax bases cannot generate. Growth and underinvestment are colliding. The people arriving expect services that existing tax structures cannot support. The gap between expectations and capacity is widening. 5th, the Ozarks influence Missouri's identity more than St. Louis or Kansas City. Politically, culturally, demographically, the Ozarks shape Missouri's character more than the urban centers that get more attention. Kansas City and St. Louis are gateways. They are connected to national patterns, integrated into coastal conversations, cosmopolitan in ways that distinguish them from the rest of the state. The Ozarks are Missouri. The values, the culture, the political instincts that define the state flow outward from here, not inward from the cities. 4. Corporate land ownership is increasing. Private investors, timber companies, investment funds, and wealthy individuals are buying Ozark land at accelerating rates. Timber parcels change hands from families to corporations. Lakefront acreage transfers from local owners to distant investors. Long-term control is consolidating in fewer hands. This happens quietly. No announcements, no coverage, just transactions that accumulate into ownership patterns that will shape the region for generations. 3. The region attracts quiet wealth. The Ozarks don't attract tech billionaires seeking publicity. They attract legacy money, retirees with accumulated wealth, and investors who value privacy over attention. This wealth doesn't announce itself. It doesn't post on social media or generate lifestyle coverage. It simply buys land, businesses, and influence without the visibility that wealth creates elsewhere. The quiet wealth reshaping the Ozarks doesn't appear in narratives about the region, but it's transforming ownership patterns nonetheless. 2. The Ozarks survive recessions better than boom states. The Ozarks never boomed the way coastal states or Sunbelt cities did. The explosive growth that created wealth elsewhere did not happen here. That means the Ozarks also do not bust the way boom regions do. Growth here is slower, and collapse is slower too. The cycles that devastate volatile economies dampen before they reach the Ozarks. Surviving recessions better than places that seem more prosperous is an advantage that only becomes visible when recessions actually arrive. The Ozarks were never behind. They were different. The narrative that the Ozarks are backward or left behind misses something fundamental. The rest of America chased expansion, growth for growth's sake, boom cycles that promised wealth and delivered volatility. The Ozarks prioritized endurance, survival across generations rather than success in single lifetimes, persistence rather than explosion. And in a country addicted to booms and busts, a country watching boom states struggle with the consequences of their booms, endurance might win. The Ozarks weren't behind. They were playing a different game, and that game is looking smarter every year. The Ozarks aren't simple. They're layered, complicated, misunderstood, and far more powerful in shaping Missouri, its politics, its culture, its identity, than most people realize. Which truth surprised you most? Which one changed how you think about this region? Drop it in the comments. Tell me what you've experienced if you live here, or what assumptions you held if you don't. And if you want more truths about Missouri that don't make headlines, the analysis that goes beyond tourism brochures and stereotype narratives, subscribe to Hard Truth Untold. Because the places that matter most are usually the places that get understood least, and the Ozarks have been misunderstood for far too long.